When a narcissist wounds you, whether through cruelty, abandonment, betrayal, or manipulation, what most people don't realize is that the experience is less about you and more about the narcissist's psychological strategy for self-preservation. The pain you feel is real, raw, and deeply personal. But to the narcissist, your pain is a byproduct, not a concern. It's a reaction they seek, not for your benefit, but as confirmation that they still hold emotional power over you. It's not love, and it's not connection. It's domination masquerading as validation. But here's the paradox. They never prepare for. The high they experience in that moment is fleeting. It doesn't last. There's a brief, twisted gratification. Yes, but it fades faster than they ever expect. The moment they hurt you, they may feel an inflated sense of control, even superiority. They believe they've won, but it's an illusion. Because beneath that surface is a kind of psychic hunger that's never truly satisfied. That's where we must understand the architecture of the narcissistic psyche. It's built on fragility, not strength. At the core of the narcissist is a desperate, unrelenting need to be significant, often born from deep childhood wounds, emotional neglect, or fractured identities. They've constructed an image, a false self, that demands constant attention, affirmation, and emotional supply. When you become attached to them, when you offer them love or support, you temporarily stabilize that inner chaos. But when you challenge them, or worse, see through them, that mask begins to crack. So when they hurt you, it's not always out of cold calculation. Sometimes it's reactive. It's the result of fear disguised as power. You've threatened their image by being too independent, too emotionally intelligent, too unwilling to collapse under their pressure. And so they strike, hoping to reassert control. But even then, it doesn't fill the void, because what they really want, though they'll never admit it, is to be loved in a way they don't believe they deserve. Now, after the act, once the dust settles, what's left? Not satisfaction, not peace, not fulfillment. What remains is a hollow echo. They may scroll through your social media, trying to see if you're broken, if you're still reacting, still feeding them indirectly. They may manufacture new drama to test if the cord is truly cut. Why? Because the high wore off too soon. And now they're faced with the very emptiness they tried to escape by hurting you in the first place. This is not strength. It's psychological addiction. Narcissists are addicted to emotional power, the way others might be addicted to alcohol or drugs. They chase it. They need more of it. But every dose is weaker than the last. You, the empath, the deeply feeling soul, became their most potent source. Not because you were weak, but because you had something they didn't. Depth, authenticity, presence. That's the tragedy and the lesson. Your suffering is not meaningless. It reveals just how much value you had. The pain you felt was not because you lacked worth, but because you had it in abundance. They hurt you because they were drawn to that worth, yet utterly incapable of holding it without corrupting it. And still, you must not stay trapped in the fantasy that your pain will be the thing that teaches them. Most of the time, it won't. Not in the way you'd hope. Change rarely comes through your suffering. It only comes when their suffering outweighs their denial, which, for many narcissists, is a wall built too high. But if there is a moment of clarity for them, if there's even a flicker of truth, it comes when you walk away. Not just physically, but emotionally. When you reclaim your story, when you stop feeding their need to feel powerful, when you stop allowing them to define your worth, you disrupt their cycle. You break the pattern. And in that vacuum, they're left with the silence of their own making. What they feel after hurting you is not triumph, it is fleeting dominance, quickly followed by the weight of their own emptiness. They will likely deny it, disguise it, distract themselves from it, but it is there, and it is haunting. So if you're still wondering whether your absence matters, let me tell you this, it does. Your detachment is their reckoning. Your peace is their mirror. And your healing is not just your justice, it's your liberation. Because the moment you stop reacting, the moment you stop bleeding for someone who cuts to feel alive, that is the moment you reclaim your soul. And there is no greater power than that. One of the most misunderstood aspects of dealing with narcissists is this: they often feel more lost after hurting someone than before. Not that they'll admit it, not that you'll see it on their face, but it's there, tucked deep beneath the facade of superiority. And it stems from a truth they spend their entire life running from. They don't know who they are without someone else to manipulate. When you understand this, everything begins to change. You stop asking, how could they do this to me? And start asking, what are they avoiding in themselves by doing this? That shift is powerful. It moves you from being emotionally entangled to psychologically informed. You begin to see that their cruelty is not the mark of strength, but the mask of internal chaos. The more control they exert, the more unstable they actually feel. Now, after they've hurt you, whether through gaslighting, betrayal, or emotional abandonment, the narcissist isn't sitting in silent satisfaction, quite the opposite. Their mind enters a spiral. They start scanning for signs of how you're reacting. Are you still upset? Have you blocked them? Are you posting anything that might signal pain or indifference? Because, make no mistake, your indifference terrifies them more than your anger ever did. Your rage meant you still cared. Your silence, that means the illusion of control is shattering. They might look calm on the outside, but internally, they begin to feel the creeping anxiety of irrelevance. And that's devastating for a narcissist. Their entire identity is structured around being needed, admired, feared, or envied. So when they hurt you, and the outcome is not your collapse, but your growth, that's the beginning of their psychological disorientation. What do they feel? Confusion, primarily. A deep existential confusion. Because narcissists aren't equipped to process emotional complexity. They can mimic emotions, but they rarely experience them with depth. Their inner world is transactional, not relational. You gave them love, and in their mind, that was leverage. When you withdraw that love, not with hatred, but with resolve, they have no idea how to respond. Their usual scripts no longer apply. And that disorientation often leads to self-soothing behaviors, reaching out to new supply, jumping into another relationship, launching smear campaigns. It's all an attempt to reaffirm a narrative. I still matter, I still have power. But deep down, they begin to suspect the opposite might be true. And that suspicion, though buried, creates a psychological wound they don't know how to heal. What makes it worse for them is that the person they hurt was often the most emotionally generous, patient, and forgiving figure in their life. They didn't just lose a supply. They lost the one person who gave them a taste of unconditionality, even if they abused it. And that haunts them more than they'll ever confess. Because narcissists are terrified of being truly seen. Yet the empath saw them, loved them, and still had to walk away. That is unbearable. Not because they miss you per se, but because losing you proved something terrifying, that they can be seen, understood, and still left. That realization doesn't turn them into better people overnight, but it does create an echo, a whisper they can't quite silence. It follows them into their new relationships, into the quiet moments when the mask slips, into the late nights when they scroll through memories, not for connection, but for control. What they really feel after hurting you is not just emptiness, but the beginning of a reckoning, a sense that they've damaged the very thing they secretly hoped would save them, but their pride won't let them reach for repair. Their ego won't allow confession, so they remain locked in the prison of their own making. Doors open, but unwilling to walk out. You, on the other hand, walk forward, not because the pain disappears, but because you chose truth over illusion. That choice is the great divide. It's what distinguishes healing from stagnation. The narcissist hurts others to avoid confronting themselves, but you confront yourself to stop the cycle of hurt. That's not weakness, that's maturity, that's strength. And that strength, your quiet, grounded, consistent strength, is what they'll never forget. Not because they appreciate it, but because they can't replicate it. You became a mirror. And once a narcissist sees themselves in that mirror, truly sees, they can never unsee it. So don't underestimate your silence. Don't doubt the power of your exit. It may be the loudest truth they've ever heard, and it may echo in their life far longer than your presence ever did. There's a moment, a very subtle one, that occurs after the narcissist has inflicted emotional damage. It's the moment when their carefully constructed image begins to crack. It's fleeting, often buried under layers of defense, but it's real. And it's in that moment that they're confronted by something they cannot quite process: guilt. Now, guilt, in the mind of a narcissist, is not like guilt in the ordinary sense. It doesn't emerge in a mature, remorseful form. Instead, it appears as agitation, as restlessness, as the vague sense that something has gone wrong, but without the moral framework to truly own it. Why? Because guilt, real guilt, requires an integrated sense of self. It demands conscience. And for the narcissist, that conscience has been buried beneath years of avoidance, denial, and projection. But here's the paradox: they're not unaware. On the contrary, many narcissists are highly attuned to the impact they have on others. It's part of how they manipulate so effectively. They learn your vulnerabilities not to protect them, but to control them. And in doing so, they often recognize the depth of the wound they've caused, even if they don't admit it out loud. That recognition haunts them. It's not guilt in the traditional moral sense. It's existential discomfort, a kind of soul-level unease that they can't name or explain. So what do they do with that unease? They transmute it. They convert it into blame, into rage, into grandiosity, anything but accountability. Because to truly admit fault would mean confronting the very self they've spent their lives avoiding. And that self is fragile, it's ashamed, it's terrified of abandonment. And most of all, it is profoundly insecure. Here's the deeper layer. Narcissists often feel unworthy of love at the core of their being. Not consciously, but implicitly. That's why they push away the very people who care about them. That's why they sabotage intimacy. Because real intimacy requires vulnerability. It demands mutual responsibility. And in the narcissist worldview, vulnerability is weakness. They would rather destroy the relationship than risk exposure. And yet, here's where it becomes tragically ironic. Once they've hurt you, once they've driven you away. They feel a hollow sense of loss, not always for you as a person, but for the role you played. You were the stabilizer, the mirror, the emotional container. You saw something in them that they couldn't see in themselves. And when they damage that bond, a kind of psychic fracture emerges. That fracture is not easily healed. It's not patched by new relationships or surface level apologies. Because beneath the ego, beneath the manipulation, beneath even the rage, there is a child, a deeply wounded child who never learned how to cope with rejection, who equated criticism with annihilation, and who now lashes out whenever intimacy feels too close. That child is still inside the narcissist, screaming, unseen, unsoothed. So when they hurt you, what they really feel isn't just power or control. It's a combination of confusion, shame, and emotional fragmentation. But instead of processing that, they'll often double down. They'll create new narratives. They'll tell themselves and others that you were the problem, that you were too sensitive, too needy, too difficult. It's a defense mechanism, yes, but it's also a confession that they don't know how to sit with their own remorse. And here's the critical insight. Just because they don't express regret doesn't mean they don't feel its shadow. Many narcissists live with a background noise of spiritual emptiness. They move from person to person, conflict to conflict, looking for something to fill the void, but nothing satisfies, because what they truly seek is not admiration. It's redemption, and redemption cannot come without truth, without ownership, without the courage to say, I caused pain and I must face the consequences of that. Most won't say it, most won't face it, but that doesn't mean they're free from it. Their guilt may be masked by bravado, but it leaks through in their restlessness, in their inability to be alone, in the way they speak of past relationships with contempt or exaggerated nostalgia. The truth haunts them, not loudly, but persistently. And here's where your role changes. You don't exist to fix them. You're not here to pull them out of their chaos. But by walking away, by choosing truth over trauma, by choosing dignity over drama, you become the first honest mirror they've ever faced. And whether they admit it or not, that mirror changes them. So never doubt the impact of your departure. Never underestimate the weight of the silence you left behind. Because in that silence lives the echo of accountability. And for the narcissist, that is perhaps the most foreign yet most necessary sound of all.